Welcome to the Depth Perception Podcast.
We go in depth about the perceptions and misconceptions of optometry,
which includes the business of optometry,
social issues within optometry,
and life as an optometry student.
Coming straight from Dr. Jasdeep Singh Soni,
Dr. Nadia Afghami,
Dr. Douglas Akiti,
and Svetlana Nunez. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Iveric Bio.
Iveric Bio is the company that makes Izervay, the FDA-approved injections for geographic atrophy found in late-stage macular degeneration.
Izervay slows GA progression by directly targeting a key source of retinal cell death and loss of photoreceptors.
Here is a quick video from our sponsor.
Sight. It awakens us to the present moment, guides us through essential daily tasks, shows us the road immediately ahead, and a future we can only hope to witness. Sight gives us hope, but retinal diseases can take our sight away, along with the hope that goes with it. At Iveric Bio, we see a world where vision is preserved. Our mission is to deliver transformational therapies for people with retinal diseases so they can live with hope in sight. The freedom to drive, the ability to work, the comfort of looking into a loved one's eyes, or the simple confidence to knowingly say, I see. Iveric Bio. Hope in sight.
Hear ye, guys. Today we are going to be talking about men versus women in optometry. And it actually, the title doesn't sound very good, but it actually is a very good topic. I don't know what else to call it. But I think the way we wanted to start this podcast, or actually, let me tell you guys how we thought of this podcast. JD brought it up in a very sexist way, but he didn't mean it like that.
Podcast jail immediately.
Yeah.
Jail.
We tried to send him to jail. Didn't work out. He's still on the podcast. But he didn't mean it like that. JD is not sexist. I will throw that out there. Disclaimer. We just like to attack him that way. Anyways. Men versus optometry. You guys excited about talking about this?
Yeah, I titled it Men Are From Mars, Women Are From the Depth Perception.
What did you say?
That sounds sexist.
Yeah.
Sexist doesn't only go one way, so this is disrespectful. What is going on here?
Oh, now you're offended.
I'm hella offended. What is that about? I'm from the United States of this earth, so excuse me.
JD, what are your thoughts?
I gotta watch what I say here.
Do you have a lawyer present for this podcast?
I might have to hire one.
Who is your representative today?
I'll represent myself today. I will say, there's differences for our experiences, so it's good to just kind of talk about them, put them out there.
And speaking about experiences, first question of the day. How do we think our experience has been different for us? Who wrote this question?
What's going on?
I wrote this question.
From one of our viewers.
What's happening?
Okay, let me try to put the question in better terms.
Okay, don't take any of this out. This is great. This is great content. Let me look at the question as well. I'm scared.
Okay, if I read the question the way it's written, how do we think experience has been different for us in career, school, or with patients? And I think a better way to say that is, how has each of our experiences been different for us in our career? Let's start off with in school, and then we'll move on to in patient care. So in school, Doug, you go first.
How do I feel like my experience has been being a man, or just my experience in school? Like what as it pertains to what?
The podcast is about men versus women. So, like, just did you ever notice, like, in school, if like men were being treated than like your fellow women classmates, vice versa? Like, what was the dynamics? Why don't you start by telling us like your class like breakdown? Like, how many men did you have? How many women in your class? And then maybe your professor breakdown. Like, how many women professors did you have?
I love the breakdown that you just gave. That
Thank
very
you.
much helps me figure out how I can answer this
Navigate.
question.
Okay.
Nadia should have
I'm
And
read.
writing questions from now on. Everyone's
so I'll say, okay, we had about we had about 48 people in my class, like ending out. We started with about 60. We had 48. There were definitely more women than men in my class. I would say maybe 60-40, maybe
a good.
70-30, but I think 60-40. It wasn't
So out
too
of like
imbalanced.
48 students, how many men were there? Like 10? 20?
Yeah, like maybe 15, maybe it wasn't half and half. I just 60-40. So yeah, I think maybe about 15 or so, and vice versa. The dynamic, I think that in classes, I guess first the professors, right? So we had more female professors than male. Yeah, we
Interesting.
had like an optics professor who's a male and contact lens professor who's a male. Most of actually, now I'm thinking about it, DVT male. Okay, it was kind of split that way too, actually. So maybe 50-50. But it just felt like female would get more wow, can't speak, preferential treatment.
How so?
More attention in the labs. Definitely, like you had to go seek out for attention if you were a male. They wouldn't come check on you. They wouldn't make sure that you're like, yeah, how's it going? But I feel like female had more attention to them as in terms of like learning in clinic those first 2 years.
And why do you think that is?
'Cause it's women versus men.
Yeah. I mean, you choose your fruits carefully, but like why do you think like the professor was it like a female professor that you thought was favoring the women? Or like the male professors also favored talking to the
I feel
girls?
like, yeah, both. I feel
And do
like
you think it's because like they were just friendlier or they asked for help more because like the men just gave off the like, hey, I'm okay, or what do you think is the reason?
to me it seemed like women, like they would just go to women, whether it be a male or female professor, without even having to ask for help. And then if it were a guy, aka me, I would like go looking for help, but then the professors are already occupied helping someone else. So that left us having to figure it out in our little groups. And also just in general, I feel like we didn't have enough staff to like help everyone in general. So it was already scarce because of not enough staff. And then it's like there's not enough time for them to help every single person and give attention to everyone. So I don't think it was a like men only went to female or ladies only went to female, but it was just kind of like that for some reason. That makes sense.
What about you, JD, since you're the other male here? What was your
School was about 4 years ago, so I don't really have much to recall. But happy to speak about the career endeavors and maybe some career thoughts when needed.
okay? Next, Nadia.
4 years ago wasn't that long, bro.
I
I don't remember interactions about like I mean definitely there is more females in our optometry program for mostly every year. But in terms of dynamics, I definitely can say I guess we could compare like while we're seeing patients when you're in third and fourth year, or just conversations after that. I think maybe patients can treat you less in a creepy way, or I've had definitely a lot of female colleagues who would say like they had to worry about that, right? Like getting hit on or maybe gaining respect when they're walking in the room, especially as a student. And so I think I remember having those conversations more with my female colleagues, but not necessarily for me having that issue. That would be what I recall.
So your breakdown was pretty split, or how many like men in your class versus female?
I think it was also about 60% female.
And your professors, are they mostly male or female?
Seemed pretty evenly balanced, not necessarily skewed in direction.
Got it. Okay.
I didn't mind the extra female percentage there.
Moving on. Nadia.
Y'all gotta, why you have to be so
Anyway.
weird? Oh my gosh.
I'm very pro,
That did not have to be as weird as it was.
Don't worry. Well, we can dive into that part later. Right now we're just focused on this one question, So yeah, I guess I'll go next. In my class, I think, well, I had, my two classes. So there was obviously more. I think it would be like 70-30 if I had to say. Like it was a lot more women than men. Professor wise though, I think it was pretty even. I think we were split pretty evenly there. And as much as like, I don't know, I didn't have that same experience that Doug had, but I feel like our clinic groups were pretty split evenly, like men and women wise. And so we would help each other. And if we had questions, we would get help. They would just like rotate. So I don't know how your clinic's set up, but we were like in a circle. So they would like just come around. So I don't feel like they paid more attention to like one group than the other. What about you, Svet?
I think my class, we're 68 of us, and I want to say there's 5 to 7 guys, and the rest are girls.
What?
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's like 80-20.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
crazy.
If I got my numbers wrong, let's say there's 10 guys versus 6. Okay, but like 10 guys is still nothing.
Wow.
And I can think of the current first year class because I know a few of them. I think in the first year class, there's like 5 to 10 guys. I wanted to say 3 at first, but giving
Out of
5
how
to 10.
many?
They're another class of like, I think there's 67, 68 as well.
That's
Um,
crazy.
What was that?
No wonder I didn't get into Berkeley.
But I don't know. I can't say that there's any experience that I felt like Doug has felt. I think our clinics have rotated really well with our professors and our attendings. They check in on all of us as little groups. And then for the actual like attendings in clinic and academia, I would say that we have a good 50-50 split in attendings in academia. The differences in representation, I think, does not involve gender. It involves more like diversity type stuff, but today we're talking about gender. But in gender-wise, I think it's 50-50 when you're talking about like administration, everybody who's working there, and all that.
Is your dean a woman or no?
My dean is a male. What about you guys?
My
dean was a
woman.
male.
I had a female.
First
dean.
had a male, then a female.
Okay.
50-50.
Yeah, 50-50. See? So
Do you think an optometry school should say, hey, we have 90% women, we should be more conscious about balancing it out?
No.
No, I don't think so because it's like go ahead, Doug. Oh, okay. I think it's dependent on who's applying. I think there's more women applying in general. So then because you have more women applying, more women get in. And it's not that men are not welcomed in optometry. Men and women are both welcomed in optometry, but it's just like whoever's applying, there's probably more females.
Why do you think more women are applying to optometry school now than men?
I'll have a great answer, but Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what you said because I was going to say the same thing. I feel like it has to do a lot with the application pool. Excuse me. And so if your application pool is more female than male, then obviously more females are going to get in. But I also feel like it is known that optometry is a more so like there's more women in optometry than there are male. Like it's kind of a women dominated profession. You see those stats before getting into school. And I think one of the main reasons of that is because of the fact that there's a great work life balance that optometry presents. I think women really consider that in their career goals. And with optometry being really flexible and, you're not on call a lot depending on where you work, but for the most part, I think that may be a reason for why a lot of women see that as attractive and kind of go towards that.
Women account for only 45% of practicing optometrists. So,
Oopsies. But that's kind of interesting though, because I feel like we should look at the stats for optometry schools. I feel like most schools have way more women than male. All that, like, we've been to many conferences, you can see it. So
the
how is
number
that so?
the
That's a good
number of
point.
optometrists practicing in the U.S. increased about 12% in 2020 to about
Can you
58,000.
come closer? Come close.
Hello. Let me move my stats to this side so I
Oh,
can.
perfect.
Is this better?
Yeah.
You sound great.
Okay, thanks, guys. The number of optometrists practicing in the U.S. increased about 12.5% in 2020 to about 58,000, with the number of male ODs increasing 10.7% and the number of women ODs increasing 14.8%. However, women still account for only 45% of practicing optometrists.
Where did you statistics from?
Women in optometry,
Wikipedia.com.
the women in optometry page.
Okay,
Nice.
I have some stats to share too that I just looked up. The ASCO for the applicant student profile and prerequisites said that for the OptumCAS application cycle of 2021 to 2022 for fall admission in 2022, and these are including the 23 schools, 72% were female and 28% with male, and less than 1% did not report a gender. So, like Doug was saying, the students that are going into school now mostly are more females than males, which gives me, if we're putting all this together, the impression that people that were people that are currently practicing are like older doctors that are more male. And I don't know when, but at one point, more females decided to start getting into optometry.
What do you think about Doug's theory?
What was Doug's theory?
Yeah, what was it?
Essentially, there's a
Yeah.
better work life. I'll repeat for you, brother.
Thank you so much, bro.
Yeah, no problem. There's a better work life balance, and that's kind of enticing women to join into a field that might be better for them.
Based
I
on
agree.
what's the work life balance that we have versus like if I was like a nurse practitioner?
Okay,
Working 12-hour days, shifts of 12-hour days, or having to go on call, where you have to wake up,
But
if you're
my pay
overnight.
grade as would have also been the same. So if I was a nurse practitioner and I was on call and doing all those things, then my salary would also increase. So technically, it's just like you kind of reap what you sow in that sense.
But again, okay, if you have a newborn baby, but then you're going to work at 3 a.m. because you work the overnight shift, how is that a better work-life balance than you working
If
9 to 5?
If I have a baby, then and I'm on maternity leave, I'm not going to work no matter what I do as a job.
Well, I'm
Also,
saying
I
like
mean,
a newborn after maternity leave.
what about like dentistry? Do you think that if I was a dentist that I wouldn't have the same kind of work-life balance? Dentists aren't
No.
normally on. I mean, I'm on call. I'm still on call as an optometrist. Like we still have patients that need to come on the weekends. And dentistry is kind of the same too. So do you think that there's been an increase in dental like women versus men as well because of that work-life balance?
Well, I definitely prefaced in general when I made that statement. So all of this, I don't understand, but
Or
I
men
was
versus
saying in
women?
general for sure.
Okay, I would like to side with Doug really quickly because I did choose optometry for the work-life balance. And talking to other friends, I'm very family oriented, want to have a big family at one point, and I wanted a career where it would be easy to say, okay, I'm only going to work 1 or 2 days out of the week because I don't know, I have a degree, I'm a doctor, but I also want to be a mother, have a family, and 1 or 2 days sounds great. So that's one of the reasons why I picked optometry. I didn't feel like I always wanted to be a doctor, but if I went to MD and went to medical school, did all those years, I feel like, and then at one point I was like, oh, if I go to MD, I want to do surgery. This was me like SV back in like, I don't know, high school, early college. I was debating, okay, if I'm an MD, I do all these years, but then at one point I don't want to be like, do all these years of school to then only work like 1 or 2 days out of the week because my main goal is like have a family. So it'd be not that it's a waste of time, but looking at different priorities and then falling in love with eyes and then seeing everything you can do as an optometrist and have this amazing work-life balance just pushed me in this direction.
The point is though, like the work-life balance over like the last 100 years has been pretty much the same, I would say. So how come all of a sudden women are like, oh, now the work-life balance of being an optometrist is better versus like 20 years ago?
Well, maybe more women are pursuing opportunities to develop, go farther in their education, and want a career themselves as well. Is
And
that
why do you
possible?
think and why do you think that is?
More women empowerment or changing in times?
I could see that. I think on social media, I always see, the independent boss woman, the one who's made, I don't know, the CEO, made a career for herself. Not that that's trendy, but I think, I don't know, our society has kind of moved in that direction. Would you agree, Nadia?
Um, yeah, and it's actually a good point. I know we're not talking about like minorities technically, but I also believe like one of my theories about like how we can get more diversity in programs such as optometry is that we need more representation, right? So as soon as we see like, oh, this person who looks like me has become like something like a doctor, and reaching out to these communities of women and minorities and Hispanic and Black communities, in like all of these different parts that like we can reach out and tell people like, oh, hey, you can do it. And I think like maybe, yes, you're right. Like the we've become more equal partners maybe over the last couple of years where we're embracing the fact that women can do it and be doctors and do all these things, has spiked like more interest in the field in general. It would be interesting to see what the rise in women in other professions is as well. Like we don't really know. Like, is there more women technically applying to med school now? Is there more women trying to be nurses? Is there more women trying to be dentists? I have a feeling that like just in general, women are applying more to these kinds of positions.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of you, when you mentioned like minorities going into education, I think being a minority and then being female and pursuing higher education, like when I see a Latina doctor, I'm like, oh wow, I can be Latina and a doctor. And then for you to see someone who's a Persian doctor to any other young Persian woman, they're like, wow, I can pursue that too, or I can do that too. And for whatever reason, coming from immigrant families, coming from families who have struggled in the past, and then suddenly now their children or grandchildren are doctors, that's like, I don't know, that was always my dream as a kid.
Do you
Yeah, I
feel
mean,
like if you have a point, feel free to jump in. But do you feel like that was a challenge for you as a woman, saying, "Hey, I don't have role models necessarily to be a doctor," or it's nice to see those role models? Like, um, was there a challenge there?
It's a challenge till this day. Like, no one in my family has studied for boards.
I think
What
it's
is
different.
boards?
Yeah, I think it's
Is there,
different too because I agree with this minority thing. Like or I think a lot of us are we first gen?
Yeah,
Like,
All
I
of
think we
us.
all
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we all had to figure that part out on our own. But also, I think like coming from that background, our parents wanted us to be strong and independent, and having a
are.
career as a doctor of any sort is power.
Yeah.
I I don't need to be married to a man to have a successful life now. You know, I am choosing to be with Steven because he is my partner and my best friend, and I don't need him financially. Like, if I want to go buy something, I don't need to ask Steven. You know, I'm just doing whatever it is that I need to do. And that, in a way, is also very powerful, you know, in this day and age, because back then, you know, you can't leave your husband, maybe even if he's a bad man, because you needed him, right? And
Yeah.
now we don't need to depend on these things. And I think that having a career now in like the sciences and things like that is just the freedom that we have.
Shout outs to Neo for teaching us about Miss Independent.
Shout out.
Ever since
You're really the
2008,
reason
you
why
know.
I applied to optometry school. Thank you,
Drink
Neo.
some of his blood. Drink some of his facts.
I also think like now in this day of like social media, like things are more accessible for us to see people in this position. I mean, I was lucky to have my mom's friend was an optometrist, so I was like, oh wow, like, you know, a woman who's Persian, like she's a doctor is crazy, because it was so much more rare back then, because it's like you have to seek these people, right? Versus like now we're able to like look on social and follow our heroes and see ourselves in them as well.
Let's go deeper though. I have a question. So,
Okay.
as you guys can see, you know, you guys are striving as women to, you know, pursue a deeper career, become doctors. A lot of people in society are doing that as well. So, what do we think about that in terms of how, like, people are having kids later, starting families later because they've been spending a lot of years in school and, you know, pursuing their dreams? What do you guys feel about that, you know, just societally and, you know, on a family aspect?
I always say, go you, girl. I mean, there's nothing that you miss in life if you start having kids in your late 30s, early 40s. There's nothing that you miss. If you can, you've done your education, you've started a career, building your career, and then you're going to have kids later in life. Like, what else are you missing? It's not like these women or individuals are not, well, women are not having children, or not like having that desire of making a family is not actually happening. It is happening, but it's happening later. And if you've started a career making doctor money, if you need to freeze your eggs, go ahead and freeze your eggs. Like, there's so many different things that we can do. And the only reason I say doctor money is because, like, the reality is some people can't afford that because it's expensive. Not saying that doctor money can afford it, but it's expensive for everybody. But like, you have all these different avenues to kind of like experience all of life. If you want to include having children to be part of life, like, you're not missing out on anything just because you have children later in life. I think it's a really sad societal expectation to expect or to think that women can only have children in their youth, or like at a very young age, when that's not the truth. You can have a healthy baby when you're like in your late 30s, early 40s. You've seen it. Are is there risk? Yeah, sure, there's like risk when you do everything, sure, but like, hopefully with today's modern medicine, everything that they do, I don't know what they do, but there's like different things that you can do and still have healthy babies.
Nadia, what do you feel about this?
I forgot the exact question, but something about having families later, like starting your family later in life, right? In general. I think our life expectancy has changed a lot over, you know, the last 100 years or so. And I also am a strong believer that time's going to pass anyways to do whatever you want. You know, like that time's going to pass anyway. Every time I wanted to like be like, oh, I'm getting so old to like apply to optometry school, you know, it's been a couple years. Like I did my master's and like, what am I going to do? Apply now? I'm going to be 30. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be 30 anyway. I might as well be a doctor, you know, like I might as well do whatever it is that I want to do with this life. And I don't feel like, I mean, I see patients that are my age who have like 10-year-olds, which is great. And I love that for them. And in my heart, I'm like, yeah, I want a family, but was that the right path for me? No, I don't feel like I missed out like Svet. I don't feel like I would feel more fulfilled maybe if I had like children now. I think that I have had a very blessed life, and I got to do a lot of very amazing things and a lot of memories. Um, on the flip side, like when you have children young, if you have a child at 20, then by 40 you're done, right? Because they're like out and about. But now I had my time before that, and now at 40 I'm gonna have kids. Now I'm after that not done. So it's like it's a compromise either way. So it's really up to you, like how you want to fulfill your life and what your joy is. I have friends who just want to be mothers, and that's amazing. And I think that's very encouraging, and I love that. And being a mother is not easy. It's hard work. Having a family is not easy. Like you have to have this partnership when you're young, and you really have to know who you are to make it work. You have to have a lot of patience and things. And I think that in general, like, yeah, we're starting families later because we have more ambitions to do other things than have these families. But it's your choice. Like, if you want to have kids in school while you're applying, have them. There's a lot of mothers in optometry school now, and nothing's prohibiting you from doing both. Really, it's really
Yeah.
up to you. But yeah,
That makes me think of
everyone, right?
something.
Yeah, go ahead.
That makes me think of something, but I want to ask JD first before I say the thing.
Okay.
That is good to hear your ladies' background on that. I would say what comes to my head is how it affects the workforce when it comes to having like a kid. Like, does that affect someone hiring someone? For example, like we had multiple technicians who went on pregnancy leave, and it's challenging, right? When someone has to go for their personal life and things are important. But obviously, it does affect the workforce, right? And so I'm curious if you've seen experiences or feel that there's been differences for you based on gender, based on if someone thinks you're going to leave because you're going to have a kid. And I think that might, I'm curious if that affects, a woman's pay, things like that. And so that's kind of what my head goes to. How does it affect the workforce, whether it be technicians or doctors?
Well, I guess that pertains to the thing that I was going to say. So I guess I'll say the thing now, and then we can go there. So it's very interesting because I was at a rotation, and there was a girl who was like a technician, and she was really interested into applying to optometry school, and she was planning on doing it like the next year. So apparently, like checking back in, she had a kid, and that kind of like halted everything. So now she's like not considering. I think she's not considering having or going to school anymore because now she feels like she has to take care of that kid and that child. What do you guys feel about that? That's kind of tough.
The challenge to do both, probably.
Yeah, I think every woman has to make decisions in their life, and these are really tough decisions that I think is not easy for Nadia and I to kind of make an assumption or say why she made this decision, because there's so many different circumstances that like we could list out and say, and to assume is not good. I think that in general, if someone has found themselves in this position, I hope and pray that they do get to fulfill their dreams. And if they wanted to be a doctor with a child, without a child, that woman is able to do it, and that they find the support that they need. Because with a child or without a child, you need a lot of support to get through this.
Yeah, it's
100%.
interesting. I mean, I kind of touched on this before in the last question. Like, it's not possible to go to optometry school and have a child. It's not possible to have a job while you're in school. Libna did it. She had a full-time job and she was still in BSK. Like, she can do that, right? So you have to know your limits. You have to know what kind of support system that you have, which is really interesting because let's say she decided to have a child and yet her partner went to school. It is a very different dynamic because, we put so much pressure on the mother to be there versus the father, right? There was people in our class who had kids that were men, and they would just study and the wife would take care of the baby, right? But it's like the baby needs the mother, so it's a little bit different. So it's hard to say in that way, like what the right choice is. It's obviously not easy, but that doesn't mean she should give up on her dreams. It's everyone has a different timeline and everyone has a different thing. And so maybe when the child starts school, maybe when they're 5, like maybe it'll take like 4 more years, but that's fine. Like if it's really truly her passion to do both, then I believe she can do it.
If you're watching this, you can do it. No, don't give up on your goals and your dreams. You got
Yeah.
this.
I think too it's interesting that I mean it kind of brings in so many other different ideas. So I want to be careful with what I say. But I think it's interesting that we have these societal like norms like there's a norm that I was kind of touching on that like women should have children like when they're younger, but like for a male it doesn't matter when you guys have kids. No one is looking at like a 30-year-old male and being like, he's like getting too old to have a kid. No one has ever said that about a man. At least not around me.
Can I
And
interject though?
go ahead, interject.
Okay, so two things come to mind when you say that. I have a really good friend who has two kids now, and he's like in his 30s. I think his oldest kid is like 5, and the younger one is newborn. But like his favorite thing about having kids and having a kid kind of a little bit earlier was the fact that he's able to play with his kid now and like still be mobile to do that. And then I also think of like LeBron James and like how his goal in the next year or two is to play in the NBA with his son on the same team. So it's like I think that's the benefit for a guy if you have kids young to be able to still like play with your kids, like teach them how to do a sport, play sports with them, things like that on the guy aspect.
How old are you now, Doug?
I'm 33.
Okay, so you think at 23 you versus like 33, you would have been able to play with your children more at 23 than now?
Well, I don't have a kid now, and I
Yeah,
don't
but
have a kid who's
let's
0.
just say.
So if I have a kid at 43, I would definitely I'd be more mobile at 23, or when the kid is 10, so that's 53. Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do as much. I mean, we're not talking about me. I definitely will be able to do as much at 53.
Right.
But these others who aren't able to, aren't athletic, aren't physically capable, that could be tough being 53, having a 10-year-old who's running around you and stuff, and you can't move because your knees hurt.
But
Yeah.
we go back to everybody makes their own choice in life. So this is something that Doug you value. It's not I can't say that JD values it or any other guy on the podcast values that. Like yeah,
I'm
everybody values playing with their kid, but are they going to think of it to that extent? I don't
I'm
know,
just
maybe
saying that
they're
as a
happy with
point.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't think
really
Steven's
saying
going to
like
be playing
I
with
regret
in the
it.
NBA with my kid anytime soon. So maybe.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
was just
I mean,
bringing that as a point, not really
yeah, I get it.
something that like
It's actually
because
it's
then I would have
because
had a kid.
I touched on that earlier. Like you can either have your kid in your 20s and lose your 20s and 30s and then have the rest of your life, your 40s, 50, till whatever and do that, or you have this whole front end of your life where it's just about you, and then do the kid thing. It's once you have a kid, that's it. Like you are bound to this child. You
You can't
apparently
return
love them. You love them so much. My mother loves me so much. It's like you can't just like put them on the back burner anymore, which makes things hard, especially like as a mother, because I read this thing recently where it was like, imagine you're in a room with everybody that you've ever met in your whole life, right? Who is the first person that you're going to look for?
Oh, my mom.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. And like same thing, like if you're in a room with everybody that you've met your whole life, who is the first person that's going to look for you?
My mom.
And so the roles of, motherhood are very precious and a true gift. And I know it's a sore subject and some of us have mothers who are angels now that we love and miss dearly. And I'm gonna cry, but yeah. So anyway, let's get off this topic. Why don't we move on to the next part?
Totally fair. I think it's good that we went over the background of our school and maybe seeing some gender experiences, how we were raised, what are expectations from society. But I'd like to read out another statistic. So there's a 2021 Eyes on Eye Care did an optometrist report, and they said in one of their eye-opening findings, they found that the optometrist report showed that there's a significant difference between salaries for male and female ODs. Based on the salary data for optometrists polled, male ODs are taking home about $41,699 more per year than female counterparts when salaries are averaged by gender. Specifically, among employed optometrists, male ODs are earning about $32,000 more. Among practice owner males are earning about $34,000 more. And this echoes the findings, it says, the review of optometry 2020 income survey, which showed an even greater inequity with the average salary for male optometrists more than female, which was about $70,000 based on their findings. What is your thoughts?
That's crazy. That's wild. I think that's insane. I wonder if it's like being complacent. Is it complacency? Is it bias? Is it all of that? Like,
or commenting on if someone wants a work-life balance, are they working the same amount of hours? Or I mean,
right.
There's going to be multiple factors here, right? There's never one answer.
Right.
I guess maybe ladies,
like,
you could
part time.
You've heard of your
you guys?
experiences. Does that surprise you? Does that shock you? Does that validate what you're thinking?
I think a lot of the time, I think it just depends because we know women that are killing it out there. You know, who's our friend, Dr. Oh my gosh, it's gonna escape me. But Blinking Owl, Dr. Edris.
Dr. Idris.
Edris, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, she's out there killing it. I expect she's making probably a lot more than her male counterparts in a way, right? And I think that sometimes women get, I mean, you guys know what's been happening in my job, right? I'm not going to say, but, you know, I feel like they don't take women as seriously when they say something because we are known as complainers, maybe. Or we just seem like, oh, we're just complaining again, or we're just, versus like if a man was saying, hey, I don't like how the schedule looks, can we change that? Versus if I was like, hey, I don't like how the schedule works, they're just like, oh, well, that's how the schedule is, you know? So I think they don't take us as seriously because they think like, oh, they're just complaining again. Oh, they're just being dramatic. Oh, they're just having a day that it's that time of the month, you know, where's the chocolate, JD? And
is that a real problem in from other people or in the workplace?
I think that there's like a subtle undertone. Yeah, I feel like sometimes maybe I'm not being taken as seriously as I could be if I was saying it as a man. Because and women are different. I mean, my co-associate, she is a lot more timid than me. She's very quiet. She always is like, okay, that's just how it is. And I'm always the kind of person that's like, hey, this needs to change. And so I'm not afraid to be like, hey, this is what my contract says and this is what I'm owed. But I feel like a lot of women sometimes just don't feel like the battle's worth it, maybe, or aren't asking or aren't checking. And they're just like, okay, I mean, I guess that's how it is. I'm not going to be suing anyone. I'm, you know, but I'm like, if they're treating me wrong, I'm not going to be bullied. Like, I'm going to tell them. But, you know, I've just been raised to be that way.
Yeah. Piggyback on what Nadia said, I think it's hard for me to talk about the salaries just because I'm still in school and I'm not really sure how negotiation goes. I haven't had any of those experiences. But I think
okay, podcast coming soon. We got you.
Yeah. Coming soon about negotiations and contracts and finances. Anyways, I think that being a female and learning clinic, figuring out how to be an optometrist, I think there's a motivation already in me to like prove myself. One, because I'm a minority, I'm Latina, and then to another one to prove myself because I'm a female. So, and I think I have this mentality of I am good. I know what I'm doing. I know my crap, and I'm going to show you that I know this. And I always have this mentality. And the only reason I bring it up is because I think other women have this mentality too, like to kind of like show themselves as like almost worthy, or I don't want to use the word worthy, but to show themselves as experienced. And I don't know why, maybe sometimes the numbers just don't add up to that. Or like, I don't know. I don't know if these like employers are worried about like maternity leave just because we're a woman. I'm really not sure.
JD, your stats, is that for full-time employed? I'm assuming that the salary is just based on like equal hours within your
Yeah.
stats.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah, good questions. To definitely find out more about the study there, or the information on that part.
Yeah,
But I think they were trying to be clear about the gender gap in general.
right, based on I'm assuming the same amount of like hours in that sense, or like salary work, or however they're kind of breaking that down, because it's unfair
But
to say
maybe,
like, oh, they work part-time and they're making less. Well, obviously that's true.
but maybe the perception
I
of
do think.
them not working as much, or the ability to, might affect what they actually get, even if it is equal.
I don't think that's part of the wage gap, but I could be
But I
wrong.
do think complacency really has a lot to do with it. Kind of going back to what Nadia said about like, you know, how she's able to stand firm, ask questions, and her counterpart is a little more timid and not willing to do so. I know a female who was like, yeah, I would be okay with like making 80K after graduating in Cali. And I'm like, 80 what? Like, you spent all this time to make less than six figures? What are you talking about? So complacency is key. Like, and I guess maybe research too, to not know that you can make way more than that. And like, but you're just like settling and complacent with like 80 or 90. That's kind of wild. So I think it's necessary for people, you know, females and males, to kind of put their foot down and do the research and understand that you're worth more
And I think
than
it depends.
the median. Or go ahead.
And I think it depends on a lot of like how you were raised. I think Nadia and I, based on our personalities, and if you meet us and talk to us, Nadia and I come off as very confident individuals. Not that other women are not confident, but I think if you talk to Nadia and I, we come off very, I don't know, could come off strong sometimes. You guys can let us know. JD is nodding his head. I think because we're not scared to voice our opinions, and I think maybe because we were raised in a brown household with immigrant mothers who were gonna make sure that we were not gonna get run over, that we were gonna be independent women and we were gonna be solid. And sorry, Mighty Bark.
For independent women, there you go.
Tune back into episode 4 or 5. It was about confidence. Definitely check that out.
Just to kind of go back to the diversity pod too, like we have to be a certain kind of leader, because we are the spokesperson for our first generation families sometimes, you know. There's a lot of times that I have to handle things because the language barrier, or they just don't know what to do or where to go, and I have to be the leader in that situation. And so I think just in general, being like also a minority, that also makes me a little more like, hey, this is wrong, or hey, this doesn't seem like the right thing to do. Also, I read this article when I was in undergrad, and I haven't been able to find it since, but it was about how like women in general are not comedians or like funny. And it's because women are afraid to put themselves out there sometimes, because if a woman tries to tell a joke in a room and nobody laughs, everyone's like, oh, I feel really bad for her. Like, why is she doing that? Whereas if a man tells a joke and it doesn't work, they're just like, oh, that's just Tom being Tom, you know, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of like pressure to speak up or be like that, because of the fact that like there is these like clear gender roles where women are supposed to be like going with the flow and being quiet sometimes, and maybe that also has something to do with like negotiating.
Our parents really build us up to be confident. And I think that sticks with me today because, I mean, you guys have heard me talking to other doctors at conferences where like, oh, SB, like if you ever need a job, you can work with me. And the first thing I say is, I want to open up my own practice. Let me know if you want to invest. And it's like, I don't want to work for anybody. Like, okay, at one point I will have to work for somebody. So to my future employer, like I would love to work with you. But at one point, like I want to have something that's my own. the
Might have
reason
said
that I
no.
say that is because like I was raised with a mom who kind of like instilled this to me. So I think sometimes I don't know other women, if they're timid, it doesn't mean that they don't have confidence. I don't want to say that, and that's not what I'm trying to say, but sometimes it's just a little harder for anyone to express themselves in the way that maybe Nadia and I do.
It can be instilled in your household that being a male to have more confidence or to be elevated or put on a platform, and so that changes how you function the rest of your life. So I mean, those are definitely important experiences.
Let's test the theory. JD, in our group, do you have access to our chat or no?
No,
Do you have the iMessage somewhere?
I have iMessage, but no
Okay.
messages.
In the chat, write to me how much you make and how many hours you work, and then I will compare. Like, I'll tell you what I make, and we can see if it's equal.
I don't think you
But
want
also JD
Test the
also
theory
has
right now.
JD
JD's
also
been
has
working
more
longer than
years
you.
though.
Yeah.
He has
Only
more
like 2 years longer than me. The thing about JD's job is
He's-
like he is able to you travel for your job, right?
to do.
Whereas I don't want to do that. So I want to stay settled in a community where I feel safe. I don't want to be driving on the road all the time. And maybe that has something to do with things too. Like maybe he's just a little more flexible in those kinds of things than me, and that could be adding to the wage gap as well, right?
That's actually a really good point because I feel like, wow, you just said a really good point. Women, I feel like, are going to stay in their comfort zone of where they want to be, as opposed to being willing to like go travel to go make that move and get maybe a bigger bag somewhere else.
Right.
So
Because
they might stay at home. They might stay with their significant other.
more
They
risk.
might take a pay cut because of location and convenience.
yeah, I mean, I'd rather be closer to my parents. I'm an only child, and so if I'm making less here, then I could like if I had to drive 30 minutes to go away, I don't want to do that because I'd rather be like one call away and I'm home in 10 minutes if they need me. So, that's part of it too, and that could be like personality. We all know Irina, she travels a lot for her job, and I'm assuming makes bank as well, or like I don't know what she makes, but she's able to do those things because she doesn't care about being settled as much.
That
Why
might
don't
be
we
a huge.
go ahead, Doug?
That's huge. I was just gonna say that might be a groundbreaking thought that we have that really could be a big reason of why that is so.
Why don't we just share some stories at the end about maybe some experiences with patients or classmates or teachers or situations based on our gender that we've kind of seen, or any other thoughts that everybody wants to throw out at the end?
Okay, I mean, recently I had a patient. I went into a room and she was like, "Oh, are you my doctor?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Dr. Afghami," and she's like, "I was expecting my doctor to be a man," and I was like, "Oh."
Wow.
I should
I was
laugh.
like,
Wow.
"Did you think?" I was like, "Oh, did you have an appointment with
It's
Dr.
ridiculous.
Dave? Like, I just thought they like scheduled her wrong." She's like, "No, they said it was you, like Dr. Afghami, but I just thought you were a man." And I was like, "Do I look like a man?"
Oh,
like, so my hair was up that day, and I was like, "Am I manly?" Like now I'm nervous, and she's like, "No, I just am like just expecting someone else."
And then did he take
So
wow.
did he take you seriously the rest of the exam? Did he
it was
comply?
a woman. Yeah, it was a lady, and I
Oh
mean,
my
she did.
god.
I think she just thought like, oh, my doctor's gonna be a man. I don't know, but she was I think somewhere from South America, so maybe she just had this like I don't know. What do I what do I know? What do I know? I don't know.
Doug,
But
that's
yeah, I
a
was like,
deep clip.
at first, because the way she said it, she's like, "Oh, I thought you were a man," and I was like, "Why? Do I look like a man? Like, is it my hair? Like I?" And she's like, "No, I just thought that my doctor was gonna be a man," and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, surprise." So that's my story. Also, I think I don't know, a couple times in the VA, you know how those old men are sometimes.
Explain it to the people who don't know how these old men are sometimes.
Friend. One time my friend told me this story. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I'll get closer. One time my friend Rachel told me this story about how she was doing BIO on one of the patients, and she like lifted up his chair and he was like, oh, I guess it's time for my lube job. And she said
Hey,
she left.
yo.
She said she left the room because she was like, I can't finish this exam. But then I told her, I was like, Rachel, I think he meant like a car, like you know, you like raise the car up so that you can change the oil.
The most
So
perfect double entendre ever.
that was so
Wow.
funny too. I had like a really grumpy old man one time at the VA, and he was like, "Oh, my glasses are all wrong," and all this stuff. And I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." And then, and then at the end of it, he was like, "I really like you. Can I keep you?" And I was like, "Oh, like in a jar?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just want to put you in my pocket." And I was like, "I don't want to be in your pocket. I want to be in the Bahamas. Can we go there instead?" So I think it's also like just like being able to handle them in a way too, because if I had a different personality, that would be a little bit like for me. But I just like
You're saying just let it happen.
yeah, you know, it's like they're just funny. They just want to be funny, I think, and sometimes it comes off weird, but
I think it goes a couple ways. I've had some old women be a little excited to see me as well, and I don't mind. I think it's flattering. I want them to have the good experience. They get the handshake, they get the smile, they get a little tap on the shoulder.
Tap on the shoulder.
I already
eye
knew.
contact.
See, and then that's different for male and women because I think I would never touch a patient on the shoulder.
Mm.
I
You would
can't
never
do
touch
that.
a patient, like a male or woman, on the shoulder?
I think mentally it would never be a male, but because it would never be a male, I would just never do it to a female either.
Sometimes
That's
I
interesting.
accidentally
I've
will
done
like
that.
while I'm moving the slit lamp like graze their leg on accident, and then I feel so awkward. Like anyway,
Yeah.
Oh, you just say, excuse me, or oops,
I do. I'm like, oh,
sorry.
sorry. Like I always act like it wasn't a big deal, but in my head, I'm like, oh no.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm sure there's been bad experiences because I remember one time I told my preceptor, I was like, yeah, he's being really weird in the room, and he's like, did he touch you? And I was like, wow, no. I wonder if people are doing that though, because obviously he was like really Dr. Johnson was really like upset. He's like, did something happen? And I was like, relax, like no, but it's just so I'm sure people have had like different experiences, obviously.
To go back to your question, JD, I feel like I've had really good experiences and haven't been like demeaned or looked down upon. If anything, it's kind of been like the opposite. I think just because like I'm a male and I'm black and I'm young, I just always get especially like the older Hispanic women, like, oh, you're young, like. How old are you? You young? I'm like, girl, I'm not that young. But everyone always thinks I'm younger than I am. So I guess they kind of just commend me, and like it's really cool to see like a young black, Nigerian person being able to treat me and like care after my vision. So I really, I don't get looked down upon, which is I'm thankful for sure.
Yeah, I
See,
think it's
you
like
have the very much the cool guy.
yeah, how you talk to your patients and how they let you that you like set the tone, right, of how they're allowed to treat you anyway. So,
Yeah, gotta make some jokes here and there. Do a shoulder tap here and there. I do it all, JD. I learn
yeah.
from the best.
I mean, going back to the confidence spot, it's kind of that way, right? Like recently we dilate all of our new patients, right? And this guy, he was there, his hands crossed. He's like, hey, at my old practice, they just did pictures. They never dilated me. How come you guys dilated me? And I was just like, oh, well, it's like, that's the law. Like we're supposed to dilate our first time patient, just very like, you're not going to yell at me in my own exam room, sir. Like I just patient educated. I'm like, it's okay. We only have to do it once every 2 years. Like next time, just don't do it. But today we'll get a really good look and just patient educate them to the death. And then after that, he kind of calmed down. But I was like, and then at the end, you're just like, yeah, I'm sorry you had that experience and that wasn't explained to you. But at least we got it sorted out. I took a really good look at the peripheral now. We're confident that everything's healthy, and that's really important. You're not gonna yell at me in my exam room.
But you see patients now in clinic, right?
I do. Yeah.
Do you feel like they talk down or treat you like a kid or like a student?
No, but I don't think I have the full experience yet to kind of comment because I'm in the clinic that's associated with my school, so they know that's going to be students. And when it comes to gender wise, I haven't experienced anything.
When you are out of the liberal zone of University of California, Berkeley, I'm intrigued to hear your experiences.
Yeah, me too, but I hope they're all good.
I'm sure we all have tough experiences, but I'm sure based on this, of course, things could come up. So we'll have to make a part two if that happens.
Yeah, when you go to conferences, Svet, do you feel like people are like, "Oh, you're a woman," like, in general, like, "Oh, your experience," like, I think this is how this whole thing started. I think we always started talking about how when we go to conferences, we're treated a little differently, men versus women sometimes.
Yeah, I would say no, but then again, it goes back to like how I present myself. Like, we get dressed up for conferences, very professional. I'm not, when we talked about dating, I'm here to work. If you talk to me, we're talking about eyes. We're not talking about anything else. Like, I'm here for an eye conference. You're here for an eye conference. So let's talk about eyes. Like that's the vibe I'm giving. That's all we're gonna do. And if anything, I kind of relate to Doug in the sense it's like, oh, they see me there. Oh, a young Latina girl who wants to be an eye doctor or who's an upcoming eye doctor, What about you, Nadia?
I mean, I always go, and I've always been with Steven at these conferences. So, like, I think people just know that I'm with someone. I don't think particularly, I don't know, nobody's like, I think like a couple times somebody's asked like, "Oh, are you single?" Like, and then usually I'm like, "No," and they're like, "Okay," and they back off. But because I think everyone there is being professional in general, like you don't want to mess it up. These are your colleagues. We're a very small community of people, and we all kind of know each other, so you don't want to mess that up because I'm going to tell the next girl, and then she's going to tell her friend, and then that's it for you, buddy. So I think that just in our profession, people are pretty respectful for the most part in general. What about you, JD? Do you ever get hit on at conferences?
It always ends up with dating. We'll say that. So
every episode ends up about dating.
Maybe
I promise.
Comes up. But anyway.
Would you like to be hit on at the conferences?
I'm an open-minded individual who never puts down me, so
I want to put it out.
That's his resume.
Universe.
But thank you, Nadia. Thank you. I think we had a good conversation here about some experiences we had in school, how we were raised, and what we're seeing in practice. And I think this is going to be evolving, changing question, and I'm excited to talk about this stuff more.
Yeah, maybe we can have Kate Ham.
Guys.
We can have Kate Ham on, and she can tell us a little more about stats. I'm sure she is very proficient in that versus us.
That'd be great.
I also did a quick stat about dentistry. Dentistry is 50-50, guys. Pretty much. In 2021, 51.6 of all the dental schools were female.
And
is
that more though than the past?
Oh, don't know that much.
Yeah. I have a feeling yes.
But they're having the same like the other articles that are coming up is that it was a more male dominated career path and now it's becoming more female dominated, but right now with their application pool and stuff it's 50-50. In June of 2022 it says women made up 56 of the first year dental students in 2021, while optometry was at 70 something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we read before 70 something. So it's not just, I don't think it's just optometry.
We'll have to come back with some more information here for everybody. But thanks for joining, everybody. This was great.
Fun pod. Had fun with you guys. Until next time.
This was a great pod. This might be my favorite pod.
We talked about so much and it was just like unfiltered.
56 minutes. If someone's still listening, I hope it went fast for you because it felt that way here.
Better be listening. This is the best pod. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Depth Perception podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all of our platforms, including
Spotify,
Instagram,
Google Podcasts,
Apple Podcast,
YouTube. Make sure you click that button. Double tap that.
So you guys have no reason not to follow us and tune in to the next episode.
Stop wasting
Get
time.
in depth.
Subscribe.